Yeah, good, good.
So perfect. I'm starting to record. Perfect. So just to quickly go over everything, I'll just open the slide that I sent to you.
So according to the structure, you'll do the housekeeping, Mariam. Ali will do the intro and the bios. Then we'll have this slide that I'll just go through. And then I will start the questions. And then Ali, I've put in that question about the legal structure in the DIFC.
Good stuff. Thank you.
How many attendees have we got registered?
137.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so it's great news. Let me find these slides.
There's just one slide, right? I think.
Yeah. So so basically when you start, Hari, I'll just
Okay.
sorry. So after Ali's intro, and then after Ali's intro, and then you move to the panel before you start, I'll just present the slides, and then when you're done, you can just say like any indication, and I'll.
Okay. So my indication will be okay. So taking the first question. So paying it forward, because I'm going to start with paying it forward, which is the last item on that slide.
Yeah. Let me close the out. Let me close my Outlook just in case. Oh, Linda's here. Remember Linda from Wow. Oh, cute. She joined. I can see her in the lobby.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
She should open up a family office in the DIFC.
She should. She should. Are you guys in contact with her still, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think Salman spoke to her the other day, so she's,
that's nice.
Yeah.
I'll just want to make sure that you guys can see this slide.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
All right, perfect. So I'll just do it like that. Perfect.
Now Megan's going to be dialing in quite early, I guess.
What time is it over there? Because I think we did the prep call this time, didn't we?
Yeah, but it's so they're 5 hours behind me on the East Coast, so that's 6 o'clock in the morning, right?
Did she know?
No. So yeah, so 1 o'clock here is going to be. It's really slow. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, 2 o'clock is 9 o'clock, right? So
8 o'clock. So 8 o'clock is over
8
there.
o'clock. Yeah, coming up to 8
early.
o'clock. Yeah.
Not that early, Ali.
Well, not for me. I get up I get up at 5:15 every day, but some people, find that a struggle. Hey, there is Megan.
We were just talking about you, thinking it must be early over there. Was it 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock there?
It's 8 o'clock.
Okay, not so bad. Yeah, that's. I was fearing it was earlier than that, but it's on just about on the right side of civilized.
Yep, not too bad. I'm used to this too. We always have early mornings here in New York.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to join early because I had so much trouble joining the last meeting. You can hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Yeah, brilliant.
Oh, great. Phew.
Joining. Hopefully it'll be an exciting, interesting topic.
Yeah, very great. Looks like a great webinar. Super excited. And what time is it for you all?
1 o'clock for us in the UK and 4 in the UAE, right? I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's 4 p.m. here.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
I can't put the background on my thing. It's try not to show you my messy cupboard.
No, it's fine. Sometimes it's nice also, you know, it's a plain background. I think it looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just waiting.
So for
for-
Megan, towards the end, you know, the flow of the questions, I want to pick up on the web thing, but also if it's possible to ask about what does being a signatory actually mean, and because you know what I want to touch upon rather sensitively is we don't want to be just token women put in these places. We want actually the boards to take this thing seriously. So not just becoming a signatory, but what does that actually mean? How do you empower women in your organizations? Don't just become a signatory. What else do you do?
Yeah, I have in my talking points to discuss how companies can use the women's empowerment principles as a framework to have more women on the board, and then to ensure that it's not just fulfilling a quota or having a number.
Because I'm going to touch upon, because I saw this somewhere else, a board or a rather large company has tried to encourage gender diversity by allowing women to become proxies. That's almost like an insult to injury, right? It's like, I will allow you to be proxy, and if I think you've made the wrong decision, I'll override it, but if I think it's fine, I'll ratify it. So that's not really empowerment.
Yeah, definitely. That is insulting.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. I'll be sure to touch on that. I'm gonna go grab some coffee in the 4 minutes we have.
No worries. We're still waiting for Isabella, right?
Yes. I'm pinging Joanna from her team to see if she's having any trouble logging in. So just exactly at 4 p.m. I'll just let everyone in and just give a minute before I give the housekeeping, because a lot will join exactly at like 4 p.m. Dubai time. She joined? Okay, still. Just gonna call Joanna. I just spoke to Joanna, and she said that Isabella's work with the IT team at Tamimi, and they're like setting her up, so she should join in soon. Just, I think yeah.
So Mariam, have you got your closing comment? Do you remember?
I know.
Do you remember?
The Chinese family. I
Yeah,
don't think I can say it. Oh, I'll be too shy to say it. Can Ali say it on my behalf?
Oh, come on. yeah.
It's girl power. No, it's got to be.
I have
women's
no
empowerment.
speaking. I'm not well versed like you guys in speaking. The most I do is housekeeping rules.
Oh, come on, you're perfect, Mariam. You can
Oh,
you can
thank
say.
you.
You've got to give the closing
It's
comment,
because
right?
Ali loves me, really. That's why.
Of course.
Uh,
But you're going to make
so
the closing comments, right, Mariam?
would you like
Seriously, we mentioned it last time, right?
Oh, okay. If we have time, I'll for sure say it. I'll put it in there
Very good.
before we close. I'm getting worried.
It's not too dark where I am, right? I switched off the light because it's.
No, yeah, I can see you perfectly.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna admit everyone. And then we can start once Isabella joins in. Because she still has.
I'm just gonna.
Yeah.
But as you said, yes, if you can wait with me so that I can end.
Hi, Isabella. We can see you.
Hi, how are you?
Hi. Yes, I think your name has changed. Yeah, perfect. We'll just give a few minutes for everyone to join in and then we can start.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just wait.
Thank you everyone for joining in. We'll just give a few more minutes for some last minute attendees to log on in and then we will start. Thank you.
Hi, Harry. Hi, Ali. Linda here. Calling in from Spain.
Hello, Linda in the ether.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. You are live and being recorded.
Oh, great. I'll keep quiet then.
Speak later.
Hi.
Good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to those joining in from the UK and the US. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar on family offices with the DIFC, Apex Group, El Tamimi and Company, and UN Global Compact. Before we start today's session, I would like to remind everybody of a few housekeeping rules to avoid any disruptions during the session. Could you please ensure that your microphones are on mute throughout the webinar? And if you could kindly ensure that your cameras are switched off as well during the session. Last but not least, if you have any questions for our speakers, please type them in the chat box option provided, and should we have time, additional time at the end of the webinar, we can get to them. Last but not least, I'd like to remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded. And with that, I'd like to welcome our first speaker of today, Ali Hassan, Senior Representative of Europe and North America from the DIFC Authority. Over to you, Ali.
Thanks very much, Mariam. Delighted to be here. Delighted to open this webinar today. Many thanks to the team at Apex, Al-Tamimi and DIFC for making the arrangements. And thank you everyone for joining. I'm not really a speaker. I'm just a warm-up act. I am Ali Hassan and I lead international coverage for DIFC, and I've been involved with the Centre for 16 of its 17 years. We do have an extremely high quality panel for you, who I'm sure will share great insights and views on family offices and the developing role of women in managing and deploying wealth and capital. Dubai International Financial Centre has, in fact, since its inception in 2004, executed a progressive agenda, bringing to the Middle East and wider region international standards of law and regulation, and is now the largest financial services, professional services, and innovation hub in the Miaza region. We continue to push through international initiatives, whether it's data privacy, ESG principles, or adapting our regulatory regime to cater for new business models as finance meets innovation. In the private wealth space, our laws and regs support succession and wealth planning, and I think you're going to hear a little bit more about that later, through DIFC trusts, foundations, and company structures. We have, in fact, over 40 family offices in the centre, together with 150 plus foundations. In terms of the gender imperative coming to the agenda today, DIFC, as well as Dubai and the UAE, are progressive in supporting the participation of women in finance, the wider economy, and society as a whole. One example in the innovation space is DIFC's Accelerator HER, an accelerator program specifically providing support for women-led innovation companies. So we are delighted to facilitate what I am sure will be a thought-provoking discussion today, and I would now like to introduce our panelists. Firstly, we have Isabella Zadkaska, partner at Al-Tamimi. Isabella is part of the corporate structuring team at Al-Tamimi, advising corporates and particularly family businesses. We have Megan Galvin, who is part of the programs team at the UN Global Compact, focusing on gender equality and social sustainability. And last but not least, we have Harry Bambra, Global Head of Compliance Solutions at Apex Group. Harry has over 20 years of experience in financial services regulation, including stints at the UK FSA and DFSA in the DIFC, before running her own compliance consultancy firm. So that's it for me. Over to you, Harry.
Thank you very much, Ali. And thank you for the panelists. So today, if I may just quickly share a slide, Mariam, just to set the context of the discussion. Having been in the region for 16 years, now back in the UK, having worked with different women around the world in different contexts, what is interesting is the whole discussion or consideration about the role of women when it comes to money and wealth and decision making. And that's why we wanted to talk about today family offices. We often associate it with being a patriarchy, but it's actually now looking at the wider question about whether we are seeing an emerging matriarchy. And taking some stats to start with, a third of family office CEOs are actually female. The global average of female entrepreneurs is around 17%, with an average of 14% in the MENA. And one of the key strengths that women bring to the table is emotional intelligence, which gives women a strength to collaborate across genders rather than acting and operating in silos. It's often seen as as a weakness by others, but it's actually a very core strength that women carry. As a result of the growing needs of women, the growing understanding for what women need, we're seeing growth in gender lens investing. We're seeing ESG appear globally, looking at the climate, looking at social impact, looking at governance, and within that, looking at the role of women on boards and how women are given opportunities within organisations and companies where they work. But taking that point, and I know we're going to cover this in more detail, is we see a drive to put more women on boards, but how many of that relates to just meeting a quota as opposed to giving that woman the same rights and responsibility as her male counterparts? Also looking at ESG in terms of the economic value and value creation. What is the positive impact on businesses or investments when you have women in the seat of governance? And then also a very topical matter for us in the Middle East is Sharia and the position of women's income. A woman's own money and her own wealth is safeguarded for her use. And it's taking that and looking at what opportunity there are for her to be given access to financial services. It takes me to the next point, which is overlooked opportunities. So we have two aspects to that. We have women who may have wealth and the ability to take decisions financially, but how many opportunities or financial products and services are actually targeted at or directed to women? The sales practices in most of these financial institutions are driven largely by male and a male-focused strategy, and their audience is likely to be directed at males rather than the females of the families. So in looking at all of that is who is actually selling to women with decision making, who has actually identified those women with financial decision making power, and therefore who is actually losing out on the opportunity? Is it just the females who are not given access to the products, or the sales from these organisations that are not targeting those women? And finally, very importantly, is paying it forward. Women's economic empowerment. We hear about that a lot. We like to talk about it, but what does it actually mean? And from our perspective, it's looking at female entrepreneurs, creating other female entrepreneurs, so feeding back that support to other women and ultimately investing in women more broadly. So I'd like to now open up these questions to the panel. And if I may, Mariam, turn the first question to Isabella about paying it forward. And the question I'd like to ask Isabella is, given your experience in terms of structuring and the region, what's your view and how do you see the position of women, female entrepreneurs in the Middle East, and how they can be supported?
Hello everyone. In fact, that's a very, very well placed question, and the timing is excellent because the role of women in the region has been changing. I've been practicing in the GCC for 16 years, and before then I was involved indirectly in business matters that were happening in the region. And currently we are already at the stage where there are a number of female entrepreneurs helping their patriarch fathers, supporting their brothers, but more and more so those female who are the driving forces of the businesses and who are in more and more cases individually taking decisions for the business, for the future of the business that used to be run by their family members, and they want to get more involved in, and possibly they are now chairing the family group or the business, or they start their own venture. And what I have seen, of course, across the region is not the same for every country. I mean, the GCC and MENA is a term that, as we know, references a number of different countries within. But the prevailing majority supports women developing their own business ideas and pursuing them. And what I have seen is that oftentimes family members get together, are happy to give the initial financial support for a young woman to start with her business. And more of those ladies, especially in the United Arab Emirates, we can see a number of them in Qatar, a number of them in Kuwait, for example, they have been doing exceptionally very, very well. It goes back to the fact that women, Emirati women, for example, absolutely excel at school. They graduate from reputable universities with very good grades. They are dynamic in many cases, and they would like to continue achieving in their own right.
Thank you. And just picking up on that a little bit more, talking about the needs of women and the ability to give them access to finance and opportunities. If I can please address the next question to Megan, from the UN's perspective, what are your insights in terms of the UN's goals and aspirations for women's economic empowerment?
Thank you so much, Hari, and thanks everyone for joining us today for this important discussion. I'm excited to bring to you the UN's perspective on how global movements for gender equality have definitely started reaching all corners of the world. At the UN Global Compact, the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative that works to put a human face on the global market, we've seen that companies everywhere now recognize the value of actively supporting women throughout business operations, from the boardroom to the supply chain to the impacted communities at large. We've seen that companies have come to realize that what was once considered a company mission to do social good is now a business imperative. And according to a survey done by LinkedIn, we've seen that 71% of talent professionals globally agree that harassment prevention is a very important trend for the future hiring and of HR. However, discrimination against women continues to hold everyone back. We've seen that progress on SDG 5 is slow at best and stalling or even reversing in some cases.
Sorry, Megan, could I just kindly ask everybody else to go on mute if possible, please, while you're speaking? There's a bit of a reverb going on. If you wouldn't mind going on mute.
Okay, great.
Please, sorry, Megan.
No, all good. I thought that was just from my end. So I think it sounds a lot better now. So that's great. I was saying that globally women continue to be paid approximately 16% less than men. And this number actually spans up to 34% in some low to middle income countries. And we've also seen the aspiration for women in leadership, a key topic of importance for today's discussion. They're not being met, and in some cases they're actually declining. And actually last year, the UN Global Compact, together with BSR, released a report analyzing data from companies who have taken our WEP's Gender Gap Analysis tool, an anonymous online free of charge survey that companies can take to assess their gender equality performance across the workplace, marketplace, and community. And this report actually shows that while 68% of companies have a leadership commitment to gender equality in place, and over 40% of companies publicly advocate for gender equality, less than 30% of companies actually include time-bound measurable goals and targets in their strategy. So really, from the UN's perspective, we are encouraging companies to implement these strong policies that lay the groundwork for environments that support women. Without these concrete targets, adequate programming, and accountability, then there's little chance that gender gaps will close or that culture will change to enable women to thrive.
Thank you, Megan. Just a follow-on question from that. I'm aware of the UN Women's Empowerment Principles, and companies can become signatories. Indeed, my former company was a signatory. How would you like to see those things being put in place in terms, I mean, you and I have just both touched upon it, about, you know, wanting to have a number of women on boards, wanting to have women visible in certain positions, but then in reality, how many of those women are actually there given the roles and the responsibilities that they're, you know, that we're intending for them to have, rather than them just being the token to meet a quota. So how would you like to see the UN WEP and the signatory states or companies doing more to implement what should be expected?
Yeah, for sure. So first, I can just give a quick background on what are the Women's Empowerment Principles and how companies can sign up to them. So the Women's Empowerment Principles, are also known as WEPs for short, were launched a decade ago by the UN Global Compact and UN Women together to provide guidance to businesses on how to empower women across the workplace, marketplace, and community. They're grounded in the recognition that businesses have a stake in and a responsibility for gender equality and women's empowerment. And a bit more practically, the WEPs are a set of 7 principles that encourage companies to look across their businesses, understand their responsibilities, and seize opportunities for positive impact. The WEPs promote a holistic approach to gender equality, and the 7 principles cover topics ranging from women in leadership, flexible work, child or dependent care, equal pay for work of equal value, gender responsive supply chain practices, like I mentioned earlier, zero tolerance against sexual harassment in the workplace, and more. When the WEPs were established 10 years ago, there were only 39 signatories, and today there are over 5,500 leaders who have signed up to the WEPs, and this number continues to grow. And this clearly shows that companies everywhere now acknowledge the value of actively supporting women throughout business operations, again, like from the supply chains all the way up to the boardrooms. And signing the WEPs is actually a simple 2-step process. First, have your CEO sign the CEO statement of support. It's a commitment to advance gender equality across your company that every WEP signatory has signed up to and committed to advancing the same set of goals laid out in the statement of support. And then upload the signed CEO statement of support along with the online application that's available at weps.org. And once you become a WEP signatory, then there are numerous events and resources available to WEP signatories that allow them to advance gender equality more concretely than other companies who have not signed up to the WEPs. So there are some great resources on how to increase women in your boardrooms and practical ways that this can be done using the WEPs as a framework for this. And we actually recently released a report looking at companies across the G7 countries who have signed the WEPs versus companies who have not signed the WEPs and their gender equality performance, including having women at the board level. And we've seen that WEP signatories do perform better than non-WEP signatories. So I would definitely encourage you all to sign the WEPs as a great place to start on this journey towards gender equality and sustainability.
Thank you. I've got to follow into that, and I'll open this up to Megan or Isabella, actually. Membership on boards and the role of women in organisations. There have been perspectives where when a woman is sort of assertive in her role, she can be treated, deemed to be aggressive, whereas if a man is assertive, he's deemed to be effective. And it's dealing with those sort of day-to-day challenges that women have in the working environment. We're seeing obviously now ESG requiring disclosures, requiring information on the composition of boards and how decisions are taken. How do you think, or do you think that could help possibly shine a little bit more light on how women's role within organisations is and how more could be done to support them through the organisations to give them, to basically empower them within their role so they can perform? Either Megan or Isabella, I'd be interested in your views.
Megan, I think it might be better placed for you.
Sure, I've just been talking a lot, so just giving you a chance to chime in as well. Yeah, for sure. We've actually seen that research shows that increasing women's representation on corporate boards has led to improved business outcomes in multiple ways, ranging from revenue and profits to, as you mentioned, Hari, strengthened ESG performance. Nevertheless, progress has been alarmingly slow on increasing women at the board level. In 2018, women held only approximately 17% of all corporate board seats worldwide, and 20% of Fortune Global 200 companies still had all male boards. Yet we've also seen that achieving 30% female representation on corporate boards could add 6 percentage points to net margin for companies. So clearly it's not just a gain in the diversity space, it's also a gain in the financial space. And there are several ways that companies can begin to work to increase women on boards. And one of those is to ensure executive commitment, like I talked about, signing up to the Women's Empowerment Principles and using this as a framework to tackle gender equality and women's economic empowerment is a great place to start on this journey towards increasing the number of women on boards and in leadership positions. Another thing that companies can do to advance board diversity is implementing board diversity policy and appointing diversity and inclusion focal points to ensure that these targets that companies have set towards diversity and inclusion can also be met, and that there can be a policy outlining company strategies for ensuring that hiring practices are inclusive and that barriers along the corporate talent pipeline are eliminated for more women to succeed. Another very practical thing that companies can do to increase the number of women on boards is to institute age and term limits for board members. So this can ensure regular opportunities for new diverse recruitments in board and leadership and executive positions. This also keeps companies competitive in the marketplace, and it provides an opportunity for qualified women to advance their careers to this level.
Thank you. So turning to a regional point, actually, so we know from the region in a Sharia context as well, women's sort of wealth and her own earnings are relatively safeguarded for her to deploy or be protected. I've had fathers approach me historically and ask for me to help structure something or put something in place for their daughters to protect their own wealth prior to getting married or during marriage or after marriage, to give that security and safeguarding for their own daughters. So Isabella, what's your position or your own experience in that regard, given the Sharia aspect, the Middle East, and there are women in the Middle East that have wealth, but they are perhaps not guided in terms of what to do with it? You're on mute. I think you're still on mute, Isabella.
Yes, now
Okay.
you're fine, double clicked. Apologies really for it. Well, yes, so that's an interesting topic really, because of course, Sharia law, for those who are not familiar with the details, I mean, it's not really, there isn't like a rule book that we go to. It's really based on the law itself is based on a number of principles, and a significant element of those principles essentially prescribes the division of wealth post passing of an individual, right? So a Muslim individual, a father of the family, for example, passes away, and then all the heirs essentially then are able to get Sharia court, then divide or apportion really the estate of the individual who passed away. And in many cases, although Sharia wanted to secure a portion of that inheritance for women to make sure that they're not excluded, but there are situations where, in fact, under Sharia principles, and the general rule of thumb is that the daughter would actually have a lower or narrower entitlement than the son, that if there were some gifts over the period of time of lifetime of the father or mother towards the daughter, that these would reduce the entitlement under the assets that would be subject to that inheritance process, for example, right? Really high level. But what we get more and more is we do have fathers, similarly to the discussion that Harry had with one of the clients, who come to us and say, well, I've got a sister and I would like to protect her. She is going to get married, but then, she's got her own allocated position within the family, access to family wealth. What can happen if actually the husband gets involved. We want to make sure as a family we protect our sister from potential really involvement or intervention by the husband, let alone the fact that, you know, who knows, maybe the sister would stop having impact and the husband would get involved and then potentially would benefit from our own family wealth. And if that's the question, then we really, you know, look into the possible legal structures that we can implement, keeping in mind we want them to respect Sharia, because at the end of the day, Sharia principles apply to, they follow the religion, right? They follow Islam. If an individual is Muslim and passes away, then of course the asset base will be subject to Sharia inheritance in the UAE and in a lot of GCC countries. We also have fathers who say, listen, Isabella, I've got 2 daughters and they are doing very well. They're involved in the day-to-day running of the business. They help me with my board meetings. They actually sit on the board. I've got a son who is not interested. He would take his Harley Davidson and go to the desert. He will not be the one to learn how to really run the business. I cannot imagine my son taking over the managerial position and the ownership of the business after my passing. One of the good news is that under Sharia principles, Sharia gives us answers towards the division of assets under the inherited asset pool, but it doesn't discuss the management of the business. And one of the things that we are able to do, that we do quite often in those situations, is we say, okay, how about we structure something that will ensure continuity of the management of the conglomerate, right? And then of course a female that you think is well suited to do that, so long as she is interested and of course she subscribed to it, then we would make sure that she would be able to step into that role. Now, more and more, in fact, we see other family members who are male who tend to be more supportive than maybe a decade ago when I was into my early years of advising family businesses. I can see now that, first of all, if one family business has got a structure in place that really empowers women in the family, they over the years can see that the business, some of the ego-driven conflicts or those situations that are a result of essentially too many men in the boardroom get diluted, and maybe there is much more, you know, peace in the boardroom if some of the family members are actually members of that board. And nationals of MENA or GCC countries often talk to their friends and cousins and neighbors, and they say, you know what, we've got this structure, it actually works very well. And by the word of mouth, a number of families hear about the benefits of involving women in running of the business, in ownership of certain assets, or if they want to venture into something on their own, then there is a lot of support. And again, we get to see it with Emirati women, for example, who own fashion brands, who design items and jewelry, very, very beautiful, and again, really to you know, pleasing their families and also gaining their approval and feeling that they're building their individual profile.
Thanks, Isabella. Just as a follow-on from that, actually, also open to Megan as well, what's your experience in terms of seeing how product providers actually approach the women? For example, I've been in meetings myself where there'll be, you know, on one side of the table, there'll all be men except when one woman. And everybody will usually speak to all the men except the woman. And it's looking at how people might be overlooking the opportunity because she actually might be the decision maker or the one that carries the wealth. So it's looking at also whether there is an opportunity that's being missed because the women are not being approached. And secondly, if there is sufficient understanding or an attempt to understand what these women's needs are. For example, for a woman to be able to trust a product provider, they need to make sure that product provider understands what they are and what they need. And so I'd be interested to sort of gauge from your own experience if you've also seen that sort of issue where the woman who's the one wants to take the decision and wants to deploy her own funds is not even considered in the equation. You're on mute.
That's actually a very good point. So thinking about, the market and product, I mean, unfortunately, my female clients tell me that if they go to a bank, for example, or, any other financial institution, and they sit somewhere next to their husband, then unfortunately, the person at the teller or on the desk will be talking to the husband, sometimes to the extent that the wife is asking questions and the individual bank clerk will turn his head to the husband and answer to the husband instead of the wife. Those situations, in fact, are still, they are present, I think too present. A sheikha from the ruling family of the Emirate of Abu Dhabi recently really raised that point. I was privy to a smaller gathering, and she mentioned that really we would like to see, first of all, that Emirati women, Kuwaiti women, other ladies in the Middle East who have access to significant portfolios that they can decide upon. First of all, they would like to see that there are products that target needs of women by financial advisors, by institutions, by consultancies, by law firms, I would imagine as well. But they also require support that comes from female professionals on the other side. In fact, one thing that is very specific, I believe, to the region is that Middle Eastern and Gulf countries women feel much more comfortable discussing matters of wealth or family, potentially protection of their own financial position and their investment opportunities with other women. So I would say there is a strong message to us advisors and how we then approach that, so that we make sure that our female clients actually have access to female talent, to female experts that discuss those issues with them, but also financial institutions and investment companies, right? When we provide those products, that perhaps we design something that will be targeting women who have access to significant funds, but also where we staff women in those roles who sit with clients, explain products, then I think really it will be easier to have that rapport. At the end of the day, financial services are always sensitive because we are, the client will be entrusting funds that they care about, or will be asking us for guidance. We will be the ones suggesting that they opt for one solution or the other. So creation of the bond is very important, I think, in the MENA region and the GCC in general. Culturally, it's very important, but for women even more so. They will seek for specific products and also for female who will be the ones discussing those solutions with them and discussing those products with them.
For sure. To that, as a bit more of the global perspective, but it's also definitely true for the Middle East and the MENA region. We have seen a course, great strides towards gender equality, and more, not only companies, but individuals getting on board with the gender equality agenda and wanting to make women as equal as men. But we have also seen a great deal of pushback, increasingly, of course, from those who feel that their privilege is being questioned. And this is because gender equality is fundamentally a question of power. So we have to really fully recognize that we do live in a male-dominated world with a male-dominated culture. And only once we realize that this is the case, then we can start to see women's rights as a route that. Sorry, I think somebody, it's echoing.
Yeah, could everyone go on mute?
Okay.
Please.
I'm almost finished. So just wanted to make the point that we need to see women's rights as a route to change that benefits everyone. And then the pace towards this change will begin to accelerate. And the only way that we can do this is to have men as allies on the fight towards gender equality as well. And there is a great initiative run by UN Women called He for She, where it encourages men to be allies in our stance towards gender equality. So I'd also encourage you all to check that out as well.
That sounds actually really interesting, Megan. But picking up on points about it, this is a lot more than just giving females access to money or decision making. I mean, Isabella, you mentioned as well about when women go to the banks, the bank will talk to the husband, not even to the woman. And there's two points on that. One is I've also seen financial services regulation where you will have joint accounts, so long as the wife gives consent to the husband, or one party gives consent to the other party to make all the decisions, then that's fine as well from an onboarding perspective. And that raises a second question, because in other parts of the world we are now seeing vulnerability codes coming into place, asking institutions to consider what might be happening behind the scenes. So you may have a husband and wife coming in with a joint account or bank facilities, but that woman might not be able to make decisions with regards to her own financial decisions, or there may be financial control that's taking place. And in some ways, institutions, are they sort of perpetuating that, or are they taking the appropriate steps to make sure that women who have money or who want to build up their own wealth are treated the same as a man when it comes to being serviced for financial products and services? And I think that's, it picks up again, Megan, what you were saying about this is much bigger than just making sure that the woman gets heard or is given the relevant opportunity. It's also making sure that that a woman is treated appropriately and fairly in all walks of life. So I don't know if you had a comment, Isabella or Megan, on
yes,
that.
I think really that's a very good point, because of course, one thing is what is visible, but the other thing is really all those different practicalities and dynamics. And I believe that unfortunately the picture is still far from where we would like to see it, and actually see it for the benefit of us as human beings in general, really, not for the benefit of women, of course, but for the benefit of men as well. And two things come to mind. I think there is a progress, and increasingly, even behind the scenes, behind the doors, men slowly but surely, a number of them, start realizing that the fact they empower their own wives means that the wife is actually really happy in the relationship, and also at the end of the day, their life is also they are achieving much more as individuals, right? On many levels, on financial level, on their emotional level as well. A client of mine had a difficulty, a chairman of a significant regional conglomerate, because he actually proposed at some stage introducing women quota, voluntary women quota, that he thought for his company would be suitable, whereby at executive positions and senior managerial positions, they would introduce women. The quota was very low. He was looking at 20%, but he thought, it's better to have it than nothing, because he thought that was really lacking. And initially at the board discussion, there were a lot of objections, and men were saying, you know, well, really, are you a feminist? At the end of the day, he said, well, I'm not a feminist. I want our business to be successful. And if I forget about any gender related issues and I focus on practicalities of making sure that we have as many pools of talent put to the table, we absolutely need to have women to start improving our numbers, for the performance to be better, for the market recognition to be better, for consumer recognition to improve. And those arguments actually won him the board approval. Now, I found it very impressive because deep down, I do feel that he actually feels that, you know, he wanted to support women because they contribute. But then in the discussion with the board, he put it all aside and he spoke numbers, and that just, he said, it's going to speak for itself. So they adopted that it's fine. But there are still situations where it's very, very difficult for that gender diversity and for women in the Middle East to really happen. If I think about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for example, right? I mean, we are really still not where we would want to be, or maybe where Saudi women would want to be. On one hand, driving licenses are there, women can drive. On the other hand, when I talk to Saudi women, a lot of them say that there is no family approval that they drive, that they may have no marriage prospects if they drive, let alone if they have their own company that they form and they have their own business. So the situation is really different from a country to the other. But unlike decades ago, or we have very strong female role models in the MENA region and the GCC. Sheikh Lubna Al-Qasimi of Sharjah has been active for a very long time in a number of governmental positions. The UAE government specifically encourages women and promotes women to senior positions. The Expo 2020 for Dubai, the head strategy team had more women appointed to really organize the Expo and to be Expo ambassadors around the world than men. So there are a number of indicators that the situation for women actually being involved is practically changing, but there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. There is still the mindset that men have where it's a feeling of being threatened rather than thinking that together with women, men can achieve so much more. It's a clear win-win situation.
I've got one point, a statement, and I'll open up to Megan if I can then after that, just to, I'm conscious of time, but this is really, really interesting. It is this, I mean, from one aspect, women and, you know, control, etc. Women having financial independence is a form of her becoming empowered and having more power and control over her own life. And that in itself, I think, is perhaps one of the cultural issues that a lot of women face from around the world. What's your view on that? Because empowering a woman so that she has financial decision making, financial independence, could actually change the way in which she can conduct decisions about her general life. I'll open that to Megan, if I may.
Sorry, my connection dropped there for a moment. Yeah, for sure. As Isabella was saying, women's participation and leadership in business has been proven essential to driving economic and financial performance, not only across industries, but also around the world. And in fact, studies have shown that companies with higher female representation have annual returns that are 2.8 percentage points higher. And it's also estimated that $28 trillion could be added to the global GDP by 2025 through investments in gender equality. So clearly there isn't just a moral imperative to advance gender equality, there's also a strong business case. But that said, despite this strong business and financial case, progress on SDG has been alarmingly slow. We've actually seen some progress moving backwards, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic of last year. It used to be 208 years until women's economic equality, but it's now estimated that it will take 268 years to close the economic gender gap at the current pace of change. And while everyone has been affected by the pandemic, women and girls have been disproportionately impacted, from working in more healthcare jobs to working more in the informal economy to an increase in domestic violence around the world. We've definitely seen how the global pandemic has threatened to reverse the limited progress that has been made on gender equality and women's rights. And it's exacerbating these existing inequalities that we already see across every sphere, from health and the economy to security and social protection. But clearly, a great place to take action on this is to fill that gap that I previously discussed between commitment and action. Many companies say that they want to advance gender equality and they understand this business case for gender equality, as well as the moral imperative of having more women represented across their business operations, but they haven't actually implemented the programs and policies and practices necessary to making this change. So businesses really do need to walk the talk and be sure to set these time-bound and measurable goals and targets to ensure that there is a gender lens to their strategies, especially now as they are building back from the pandemic. Although, of course, there are these setbacks, like I discussed, there's also the chance to disrupt gender stereotypes, like we've discussed here earlier, and build back more gender inclusive.
Thank you. And Isabella, I'll ask the last question to you. I'm conscious of the time. I'm not sure if there's any questions coming from the panel, the audience, but in terms of your own experience and what some of the clients' needs are, or women's needs are, where have you seen the easiest or most conducive structures in terms of foundations or trust, the DIFC or elsewhere? What's your view on the best type of or good examples of structures that support women who are looking to secure and protect their earnings?
I would look into really common law principles-based offerings in the UAE, and here the Dubai International Financial Center, in my view, comes really at the front of those solutions that are really suitable. The DIFC, first of all, having been in place for many years, longer than some other economic free zones in the UAE, including the Abu Dhabi global market, and having their own courts, then, you know, there has been quite a lot of experience and even precedent established within the DIFC itself. But the DIFC offers to women entrepreneurs, first of all, vehicles in the DIFC that can be structured with different types of business activities depending on what they really want to do. They can have different classes of shares created. There might be something for them, and there might be another class for their husband or brother or sister, for example. They can really decide how the capital allocation then happens and the dividend distribution. The DIFC also has a trust regime that has been adopted, very similar in core to the trust solutions we would be able to see in other common law jurisdictions, specifically under the laws of England and Wales. The DIFC offers foundations as well, and I think foundations are a very interesting instrument because they come from the civil law environment of Liechtenstein and Luxembourg and Mauritius, and those jurisdictions used to lead on foundations, but the DIFC also has foundations available. Not every trust solution will address those needs. of women. Sometimes a foundation might be a better vehicle. And there are also not-for-profit organizations that the DIFC offers as a vehicle to be formed by women. The DIFC is the only jurisdiction that so far has developed a robust and very specifically designed single family office regime. That one, I think, could be of interest to women in the MENA region and in the GCC. And the appealing factor of the DIFC is the fact that those different solutions in vehicles can be implemented in the DIFC, but they can serve the ownership or management or protection of assets, in fact, around the world. The DIFC is a very open jurisdiction. United States dollars denominated. The documentation of those vehicles is executed in the English language, and that also really helps women who might have assets throughout the region or throughout the world, right?
Exactly. Thank you for that. And just to bring this session to a close, it's been really, really interesting. It's an interesting point we've got to now. We've heard, Megan has given the statistics on the financial benefit of women being involved in some of the decision making. Isabella, you've touched upon how women in the region that have wealth are often overlooked, not considered, and their financial requirements are not even taken on board by service providers. And then most importantly, taking those two elements together, which is probably one of the most things of interest to myself personally, is how other women can help women. And that, I think, is one of the things where we can pay it forward in all spheres of life, where we have now women who are female entrepreneurs, women who are in financial services. We can actually take a different perspective to how things have been done previously and try to make a real change all the way through the cycle and the access to decisions for women. Unless you have any other closing comments, I would like to hand over to Mariam. I want to thank Megan for her insights from the UN and taking the time very early in the US this morning. Isabella, thank you very much for sharing your insights as well. And DIFC, of course, thanking you for organising this. And Mariam, I will hand over to you in case of any questions or closing comments.
Thank you so much, Hari, Isabella, and Megan, and of course, Ali Hassan, for the insightful session. And thank you again, Megan, for logging in so early. I just wanted to give a closing remark on a lesson from the East that I personally know. A close friend from Shanghai. It's a very woman-dominated city, I would say. So based on her growing up, women there are very empowered. So when she moved to Dubai, she was quite surprised that like a lot of people are very male oriented here. So for example, in Shanghai, women there, once their parents leave their assets or their company, it's all under the daughter. And then the son ends up working for the daughter as a employee in her company and receives a salary from the daughter herself. And most sons there don't even mind it. They actually work even harder because they're supporting their sister. So the sister determines his salary, his position, and everything. So they actually prefer to have daughters, which is quite different than what everyone is used to. Yeah, so that was an interesting, it's different than what we're used to. And if anyone has any questions for any of our lovely speakers, I think we're short on time, but you can reach out to Hari, Megan, Isabella, and even Ali if you want to learn more about the DIFC. And thank you all for your time. And the recording will be live on our YouTube channel in case you've missed the first part. Thank you all.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Well,